Welcome to Fast Politics, Elliott Morris.
Hey, thanks for having me back, Molly.
So I always like to, just for everyone who's not completely read up on this, I've been a longtime fan of Elliott's work doing polling, statistical, sort of the more math side of politics. I think that's fair. And I'd
That's a
long
very
wanted
generous way to put it, Molly.
I'd long wanted to have him on the podcast, but he was at 5:38, and then now you started at 5:38, right? And then The
Uh,
Economist, or did I
yeah, I
make
was at
that
The
up?
Economist and then 538/ABC. That's probably where you were
Right.
running into some problems
Right,
having me on the
right, right,
pod.
right. But even The Economist is I actually, we have a lot of people from The Economist on, and they're fabulous. Anyway, point is, I've been a longtime fan of your work because you look at the numbers in a more of a sort of whole body experience, and because so much of this kind of stuff is about what's asked, how it's asked, what medium it's asked, there's just a lot of nuance that can really mess you up if you have it wrong. So you have new polls yesterday, and I would love you to start by talking about that.
Sure, yeah. So over at Strength in Numbers, my Substack, we've been doing a poll with a polling firm called Verisite. I'm supposed to say them. We do this every month. So we've done this with May, June, and July. This is our third survey. That's important because we can look at changes over time. So, for example, or the lack of changes, really. For example, we found the Democrats have been leading in the generic House ballot for the last three surveys. They're up by 4 now. For context, that's the survey that asks who would you vote for in your local district if the election were held today? So it's a proxy for the House vote. So stable, pro-democratic. We also asked
And
Trump
can you
approval.
just for a second, because I just, because not everyone is as read in on this as perhaps they would like to not be, but they need to be, because this is the future of American democracy and possibly our last election. What, not to be hyperbolic, but I think it's pretty much true. Can you explain what usual House generic is, like, usually sort of historically what the numbers are, because is actually a
Really
seismically
good.
huge number for that. Yeah.
Yeah, so typically what happens is in the like 2 years before a midterm, so once the new president takes office between that day, which in this case was January 20th, 2025, and the next midterm, which will be next November, the party that controls the White House, in this case Republicans, tends to lose ground over time. So they start
Right.
off doing pretty well. So that
Right.
would indicate the Republicans should be doing much better, in fact, maybe even leading or tied
Right.
in the generic ballot. The fact that they're down 4 now
Yeah.
is consequential for them. It points to a bad midterm. Just for context, at this point in 2018, the Democrats were up 6. So not 4,
Right.
but like,
Right.
within the margin of error.
Right. It's still humongous. These are huge numbers. Usually usually one party is up one or two in these generic, because you don't have a candidate. It's really just a which party is making you the least mad kind of question. All right. So continue.
So we've got those generic ballot numbers. And the paradox here, which you'll notice, Democrats are up 4. Trump is underwater severely on his approval ratings. He's down by 15 points. So 57% of the public say they disapprove of him, 42% say they approve. That's pretty terrible. For context, no other president except for Trump in his first term has had an approval rating that bad at this point through their term.
Because we're 6
Um,
months into the Trump process, Trump 2.0.
yeah, 6 months in, a president's typically still popular by like 20 points. Even Joe Biden at this point was popular by 15 points. So
Right.
minus 15 is also a very bad number. Trump is at the issue level. He's unpopular on everything from inflation and jobs in the economy and tariffs to deportations and immigration, where his numbers have decreased significantly since our June survey.
So let's stop and talk about those immigration numbers for a minute, because I think that's really important. Trump, what the sort of the two things that Trump was elected on, if you're going to take the sort of the what information we got from that 2024 cycle, was the economy and immigration. People were mad at immigrants. People were mad at inflation, right? I think it's important to realize, like, he's underwater in the economy. This is, like, I think also the first time he's ever been underwater on the economy, or at least in this way. So can you talk us through
Yep.
that?
So through his first term, Trump had a slight lead on the economy, until his numbers got so bad that he, was just dragged down on everything. He's never been 30 points underwater on inflation. Right now, he's 10 points underwater on jobs in the economy. At this point in his first term, he was positive on
Right.
both of these things. So yeah, I mean, that contributed to the, I guess, perception of Trump as a president who could like usher in economic growth or I
Right.
guess bring down prices or something, as the campaign claimed during the 2024 election. Obviously, voters don't feel that way anymore, even if they did,
Right.
feel that way during the election. 61% of people are saying they don't like how he's handling inflation or the economy right now. That's actually worse than Joe Biden at this point in his presidency. So, if you have this mental image of Joe Biden, that's like some sort of catastrophic president who raised prices. Actually, people are feeling the same way about Trump right now, at least on inflation.
But more, they're actually really feeling like there was there was a feeling that that Biden lost because of inflation, but he had better numbers on the economy than Trump did at this moment.
At this point,
And
yeah, but
and even
if
at the
you look at
end,
the
right?
2024, if you look at the 2024 impression of Biden, it's about this bad, if
Yeah.
not a little bit worse on the economy overall. I think the thing here is that people just don't like how presidents, and not to get too much into this, but they just don't like inflation in general. So
Right.
if you ask them, "Hey, how are you feeling about how the president's handling inflation?" They're gonna say they don't like it. And as soon as that's an issue for Trump, the reelection prospects for Republicans tank. It's not really a Republican thing. It's just a who's in
Right.
party thing.
People hate inflation and it kills your
Yeah.
party.
And that's
Period,
true for
paragraph.
Trump. Yeah, that's true for
True for
Trump
Trump,
too.
true for
Yeah.
Democrats. The immigration stuff, super interesting. I would love you to talk us through where Trump was on immigration on election day, where he is now, and some of how he got there.
Sure. So when Trump took office, the idea was, the American people support his deportation agenda. They want to get rid of criminals and everyone else, importantly,
Yeah.
who's here, without
Grandmothers
without
who've been here
authorization,
for
whatever.
40 years. Yeah.
Or this case in Missouri, this woman who works at the diner and the whole community is like, where did Carol go? Right?
Yeah.
She was taken by
Carol
ICE.
went to a camp.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he was positive on immigration by about 10 points when he started. Now he's underwater by 5. And we can break this out. We can separate the questions. How do you think about the president handling immigration, and how do you think about the president handling deportation? Deportation's actually worse, closer to minus
Right.
15 now, almost as bad as people say he's doing on the economy, which is important because he used to be doing worse on the economy. Now he's doing about the same on both. So
Right.
that's just important from a strategy messaging
A-
perspective.
And it's important because what it says is that people don't like the camps. That Alligator Alcatraz is only for the base
Yeah.
and the very online base, but that normal people do not like a camp.
And they don't like to put the polling point on this. They don't like non-criminal unauthorized immigrants being deported, period. For as often as we will see the image come up on social media of all the people at the Trump rally holding the mass
Right.
deportation sign, the impression of and what the campaign was claiming was that they were going to deport everyone who's like a
Right.
criminal, who's a bad guy, a real bad
Right.
hombre, right? Not
Right.
everyone else. And if you ask them, should we deport people who've been here for 10 years? The super majority of the public says no. If you ask them,
Right.
should we deport people who have kids here? People say no.
Right.
So the more often Trump does that, his numbers fall off a cliff, really, underwater.
So every story about a grandmother being deported or a kid being separated from a mother or you know, any of this stuff, which nobody wanted to begin with, probably ends up changing even more hearts and minds.
Yeah, and just think about the images too that people are
Yeah.
seeing on their television. Like, it's one thing to see the guy with the shaved head and the tattoo kneeling in CETOT or Seesaw in El Salvador, and like there are some cases where that's also people are going to think about that with like negative affect. They're going to be like, "Oh, that's like weird. I don't like that." People watching Fox News are going to be like, "Okay, good. Like they're getting rid of the
Yeah.
criminals." when they have like normal looking people, parents and kids being taken from the bus to the ICE facility, that's a different image that people are seeing. And they've told us that they don't like those sorts of deportations. So you can imagine that the more those images are on TV, the more people start to reframe. They have a different image in their head about what the administration's deportation agenda is. And that's politically worse for Trump than before. It's also morally worse, but just talking about politics here.
Yeah. Keep going.
Sure. So we've also asked if I can change the subject, support
Yeah,
for the
please.
One Big Beautiful bill.
That was actually where I was going to go next, so that's good.
And so, yeah, if we're thinking about the theme of like shit that's bad for Donald Trump, this is probably worse than immigration. We asked not just, do you support the bill? We gave people specifics. We said it's cutting Medicaid, it's cutting SNAP, it's increasing ICE funding. And yeah, some people are going to get a tax cut. A lot of people aren't. So we asked support for those individual four things. They're all underwater. And Medicaid is the most underwater. 62% of the public said they oppose of the Medicaid cuts in the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, which is one of the worst numbers I've ever seen for these like support oppose of the president's agenda.
Have you ever seen 62% of America? I mean, that's in polling world, that's a crazy number.
Yeah, to get 62% of the public disapproving, you have to do something pretty disastrous because it means inherently that independents are like 20 points against you and you've lost like 20% of your party. To answer a question, I've never seen something that is, I guess in this case, 30 points underwater, except for the 2017 Republican healthcare bill that tried to do the same thing that Republicans just did now.
Right.
So the previous really unpopular thing you'll maybe remember, the TARP bailout in 2008.
Right.
That was terrible. That was gonna
Yeah.
that like sunk. It was gonna sink Democrats in the House. That was only 8 points underwater, not 30.
Wow, that's a
And
really
the ACA was 5 points underwater.
right. And the ACA, I mean, it's important to remember that the ACA, which is Obamacare, which is now this Medicaid expansion, which is now having a skinny repeal in the BBB, which is so unpopular, was unpopular because it was new and people didn't understand what it is. This is unpopular because it's taking it away.
It's taking away a benefit I think people largely see as helping their neighbors.
And it's something they have, like, that they're entitled to. And
the trade-off, people don't like the trade-off specifically. We asked in our last survey in June, would you rather the government extend tax cuts and cut services to fund those tax cuts? Or would you rather them raise taxes and keep current level of spending so you can decrease the deficit? And by like a 60 to 10% margin, very expected, people said, oh yeah, just raise taxes on the wealthy a little bit. Don't cut services for people. Like people like when the government is doing stuff for them. Even Republicans, even the young people that I'm in lots of circles with that voted for Trump, having previously supported Democrats, they just want the government to do stuff for them, and they don't want it to give tax cuts to super wealthy people.
I'm shocked. One of the many reasons why I wanted to have you on is about these young Trump voters, the millennial. Is it millennial or it's younger than millennial?
I'm Gen Z technically.
Okay, but these young people who were Democrats, pretty reliably Democrat or pretty Democratic or low frequency, who went to the sort of podcast bros, the people who heard him on Joe Rogan and were like, this guy's great. Those people are having some buyer's remorse.
Yeah, that's right. So it's important to note this group of people probably only voted 50-50 for Trump to begin with. So again, the picture we have in our head of this group may have already been miscalibrated or
but they
misinformed by the media.
A point here is that they would have been in previous elections 60-40.
Right. Yeah. They've definitely become more Trump-leaning. But just a note on calibration. Yeah. So that group of people, according to YouGov, actually just young people overall, according to YouGov, you asked them
what age?
Less than 34 in this case. I'm not calling people who are 37 old. That's just YouGov's typification.
No. Well, between 21 and 34. That's young
18
for voters.
18 and 30.
18, 34. Yeah.
So that group of people, about half of them said they approved of Trump when his presidency started, and half said they disapproved. So he was even. At this point, that group of people, Trump's underwater by 40 points. That's 75% say they disapprove of him and 25% say they approve of him.
That seems like a
Terrible, yeah.
lot in 6 months.
Yeah, that is the biggest decline of any age group, is the biggest decline of any racial group or income group. So if you want to characterize them as having buyer's remorse, yeah, I think that's probably a little bit of what's going on here. Yeah, I think this goes back to the point I was just saying, like this group of people specifically has a kind of an Obama era government in their head,
Right.
one that's providing services, that's redistributive, that has a progressive tax system to fund
Right.
services, and they're not getting that anymore. And the reason they voted for Trump was not because they wanted a regressive tax system or tax cuts for the super wealthy, et cetera. It's because they just didn't like inflation. So
Right.
at the beginning of his term, when he was still saying we're going to bring down prices, and that looked like something he might do, then he was 50-50. When he starts increasing taxes by passing tariffs and redistributing wealth upwards and cutting services, these people are like, oh, no, 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 that's not what we signed up for. That makes sense to me.
It's what we kept telling everyone. So it's infuriating, but it's also interesting. Okay, so tell what other I want you to just sort of what other things are we missing here in this data?
Look, I
What
think,
else do you think is important to talk about?
yeah. So the other thing that I'll mention, just I guess one theme here is like stuff people and political analysts think that is wrong. Like you should
Yeah,
focus on
please.
you should
Yes,
focus
yes,
on
yes.
immigration or the economy, not immigration, whatever. The other thing that our survey says is wrong. There's an idea that that the Democratic Party's favorability rating is low because they're too woke. They've gone too far
Right.
to the left.
Oh yeah, I won't.
So we've asked about this. We asked our representative sample of Americans to tell us, do you think the Democratic Party has moved too far left, too far right, or is it fine? Has it not moved too far at all? And we asked the same thing about Republicans. The results of this is 40% of people say the Democratic Party has gone too far left. That's more than the percent of people who say that they're good, which is 35%. But 42% of people say the Republicans have gone too far right. So there's no evidence in our data that the public is saying the Democratic Party is too far to the left. At least, if anything, they're saying Republicans are a little bit more too far right than the Democrats are too far left. So, yeah, wokeism, to the extent has tanked the Democratic Party brand. That's like a 2010 to 2024 phenomenon that doesn't show up in the data at all anymore.
Just explain this to me because even though 40% of all Democrats think that the party is too lefty, that's normal, or explain?
I'm not sure it's normal. I don't have comparative numbers. I guess I would
Right.
rationalize this by saying, let me put it this way: 45% of voters say
Right.
the Democratic Party either is in the right place or has gone too far to the right,
Right.
and 40% of people say it's gone too far to the left. So
Right.
on balance, people are saying, the average person is saying Democratic Party is good or needs to move a little bit to the left.
Right.
They're saying the same thing about the Republicans, but to the right. They're saying either it's good or it needs to, or it's a little bit too far to the left. Maybe it needs to be a little bit more conservative. So yeah, there's no evidence here that like the Democratic Party brand is underwater because of
Right.
ideological extremism,
Right.
or else you'd
Which
see
is
Republican Party brand just as bad, basically.
right. That's exactly what is important here is that the problem with the Democratic brand, it's politics, right? It's leadership, right? It's the faces, not the ideas that are getting Democrats in trouble right now. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I think that's right. If you ask people to rate Democratic Party leaders, then the ones in charge, Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries, are about 20 to 30 points underwater. The party brand is 35 points underwater. The people who are making headlines as sort of reformers, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Bernie Sanders, those people, Pete Buttigieg, those are the only Democratic Party figures today that are popular, net popular with the average person. That includes lots of Republicans and independents. And notably, those people are not, those are not the people in power in the Democratic Party.
So interesting. Thank you, Elliot.
Okay, thanks, Molly.